Roger, can we kick off with that? And if you give some background, if you liked it, and then we're going to.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, everyone, for being here. So, to get right to it, rhythm is the most important element in music. And if you just go straight to Encyclopedia Britannica for a common definition of what this means, it's quoted. It says, whatever other elements a given piece of music may have, for instance, the pattern in pitch or timbre, rhythm is the one indispensable element in all music. Rhythm can exist without melody, but melody cannot exist without rhythm. So rhythm is that fundamental property or element that drives music. And this is especially true with Caribbean music, which is primarily dance music, in fact, and music with very strong West African roots, and where rhythm is paramount. Calypso's defining character is rhythm. It is how we immediately recognize it. And those rhythms, where do they come from? They come from West Africa. However, tonal approach is dominated by European musical concepts. As the Calypso developed in the Caribbean in the colonial setting. So the melodies, the scales that we use in Calypso, the melodies we use, the harmonies we use, the cadences we use in Calypso, the chord progressions and so on, are dominated by European concepts of music. And these follow strict rules. These rules of tonality were accompanied by material and political control. In other words, they didn't exist in a vacuum. They came as part of the package of European control. The colonial regime was designed to suppress and debase anything African. And we see this played out in the campaigns against, the people expression of their music, their art, their mass in the Camboulet, and the campaigns against the Camboulet and the drum dances and the drumming, the banning of the drum, the reactions to steel band the steel drum when it was first invented, all the drumming, anything to do with the African expression of music in our colonial context was considered not worthy. African people in the Caribbean transformed their musical identities to survive and thrive. They adopted the European concept of tonality and the languages of the colonizer. However, they retained the strong sense of rhythm innate to their traditional music. Those rhythms gave Calypso its essential character. Yet we still talk about Calypso storytelling and song. That's the mantra, that's the common sort of accepted definition of Calypso. But this only really scratches the surface. It only really describes one aspect of Calypso. And it does not really capture what Calypso really is. Because many, if not most genres of music can make exactly the same claim as storytelling and song. To quote Attila, Raymond Quevedo, he said, like all songs, CALYPSO has two elements. And each of these two mutually indispensable and interactive elements, lyrics and melody, has its respective special characteristics. So he defines Calypso right there as lyrics and melody. So that's the classic definition of how we still look at Calypso or how we define it. So if we wanted to accept that definition and say lyrics and melody define Calypso, if I sang this, making love one day with a girl you call it maybe, making love one day with a girl they call it maybe, I pick up baby by the railway. Is that Calypso? No. But it has the melody. Yes. It has the lyrics. But yet we know it's not Calypso. that calypso? Yeah. I haven't sung a word, I haven't sung a melody, but I've established a rhythm, and automatically you recognize calypso. It's not reggae, it's not ska, it's not zouk, it's calypso. So how could calypso be then authoritatively defined as lyrics and melody when it's obviously that when you separate the rhythm from it, it loses all meaning. It does not represent what calypso is. So what I'm saying is that we have to go past the definition of calypso as melody and lyrics and realize that the fundamental character is in the rhythms. We continue to speak as write of calypso as a literary form and refer to the connections. We even refer to the connections of the African griot as a way to validate this definition of it, which is kind of ironic. Perhaps this is because we are historically acculturated to hear calypso through a Eurocentric, and I use the word lens here. You know, we're hearing it through the way we have been acculturated to listen to music and to hear music. But in the case of calypso and the music of Africa in particular, we have to move out of that box and look at it in a different way. The vast majority of literature on calypso attests to the fact that we are kind of trapped in this. It's something akin to what Professor Kofi Agawu lecture presentation, he has one on YouTube. It's called Tonality as a Colonizing Force in African Music. In essence, calypso, melody, and its lyrics are prized, while the rhythmic vocabulary, which truly defines what calypso really is completely overlooked. Each strum pattern has a story behind it, that particular strum, and it gives you insight into the history of calypso music. These rhythms are 1 or 2 bar patterns repeated over and over to create a timeline. They're really historical musical artifacts. These rhythms are preserved pieces of a voluminous quantity of African drum rhythms adapted for the guitar or other instruments. These are survivors of the Middle Passage and the Caribbean expression of African identity through music. Also, dance movements and oral sort of orientation is different for each of these rhythms. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. Given the unity between sound and body movement in sub-Saharan African musical traditions, when playing or listening to calypso, we have to try and feel the underlying 2-beat pulse. To put it succinctly in a doctorate thesis by a gentleman called Len McCarthy on Jamaican dance music, he says corporeal factors are not merely synchronous or added on components in musical performances, but they're an essential aspect of the musical experience. So the dance and the music go together. And that's because in the African tradition, they're not separated. Music and dance are considered part of the same thing. It's part of the life. It's so embedded into everything they do. When you play calypso, you're going like this. And that's the bar. You're following the pulse of the music. Even though it's written 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it is counted 1, 2, 1, 2. They call it cut time music. It's written as 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but you don't count it that way because you don't want to be dancing to something that you should be going like this to, right? So, and sometimes you see people listening to steel band music and they're like, they're hearing this something that sounds very fast to them. They're not picking up the pulse, which is, the groove. They're not into the groove. So if we take the first rhythm that I was talking about, which in all of my discussions and conversations with different musicians from the Caribbean and people in Toronto, like Ozzie Gurley, who was the arranger, producer, co-writer of Ansel Douglas's Who Let the Dogs Out. And I asked him about what's the fundamental calypso rhythm? And a guy comes to you with a song. What does he want to hear? And he said, well, you were going like, play that for me. So it's like, isn't it strange that we have this fundamental calypso rhythm, but we don't have a word for it. There's no name for it. And that rhythm you're going to hear throughout many songs, recorded and otherwise. You may hear variations on it. You may hear it played by the guitar. You may hear it played on the keyboard or the organ, but it's always there in the background, driving the rhythm. It's and the interesting thing about it is that it never lands on the beat. Downbeat is always silent. It is felt, but it is not heard. And I wanted to play a couple of examples of that. And the first one is a song by Small Island Pride, Taxi Driver it's called. See if you can hear that strum or that pattern in the music.
Well, last year at Venezuela, boys are bounced with a senorita. Yes, she wanted a taxi driver to drive around when she in for pleasure. Boys are sent on my application, and she sent me for regulation. She said your car is a Ford, you don't respect I record. It does kill you when it overload. But she give me a chart, telling me to drive it fast. Don't mind if it don't if you really ever start to boy, who knows what you wonder what you don't be calling.
And that is, you're not hearing it, the melody is, we automatically are drawn to the melody. We may hear the bass line, and a lot of these, you can stop it around. The problem is, in a lot of these older recordings, sometimes the balance between the instruments and the voice is right up front, the brass may be up front, and you hear the bass line of the other instruments are way in the background. I think the other
it's all on one mic. The English recorder does all things with one mic, everybody in the same room. So the prominent thing was the voice and whatever the brass.
Yeah.
So they got more
So as you got last night, the landlord nearly killed me. Bristol. You said you can hear the pattern again.
Doesn't like this one.
It will play?
Nope.
Something going on there?
Landlord did.
Let's hear that one. Turn up the volume if you can. Yeah.
No obligations, don't have to be paid on family. Work like a dog, save your money. You fight a man, the boss not report, and you never see a dog pay public support. So if I get a chance, then tell me, I don't want to come back to man again. I want to be a puppy. Yes, if I get a chance, then tell me, I don't want to come back to man again. Not me. I want to be a puppy.
So that's the tinnitus or banana strum, I call it. Banana, So that's one of those strums that you find throughout the Caribbean. You find it in mango music. You find it in CALYPSO from Costa Rica and Belize. You can use that strum and it's kind of like a universal CALYPSO strum. And the banana strum is kind of like a default strum. The next one is called the Postman. And I want to play you the clip. So this is Black Prince. Listen to his guitar strum.
I see the girl, oh Lord, may I catch that she. she courts me. I see myself one
Very
time
different
in
to
that
banana strum,
family.
original in strum.
I even see she had me with first lady. So I decided to approach the young lady and express the feelings we I feel for she. But when I finished up, she answered no. Oh yes, I wish she tell me nobody can guess.
Bum,
She
bum, bum,
tell me to
bum,
bring
bum, bum, bum,
a
bum.
letter for my last woman.
Can you hear the pattern clearly?
Signature
Dun, 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 dun.
stating why we got. Bring your passport picture of the woman too. I want to know how much children will she have for you.
Okay.
If she ever put in the number.
This is a fascinating strum, and it has a connection to a traditional drumming rhythm from Tobago called the jig, the Tobago jig. Which is a dance really, how they know this thing. And all this kind of skipping around and so on. It's a Scottish kind of thing, influenced dance, but the rhythm is the pum 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 pum, pum 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 pum, da, da, dun, dun, dun. That same triplet figure within a duple time. So it's duple time, 2 beats in the bar, 1, 2, 1, 2. But the first half of the bar is divided like a triplet. So you get tan 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 tan, dum bum bum bum, bum. So you're moving back from triplet to 4, triplet to duple, or triplet. So you're moving between 2 time signatures within 1 bar. And that is such an African kind of idea where you're combining 2 time signatures together. 3 over 2, or 3 inside of 2, or it could be 6 inside of 4, as the case may be. And the whole idea is that it's a multiple time signature. And it gives you a complexity that is quite, it's beautiful to hear. And that's a complexity that you hear in a lot of Caribbean music. The idea of 3 and 4 combined on top of each other. And it is it's preserved in that simple little strum called the postman. The postman name was given because of a famous guitarist that played the Sparrow, Eugene Phillips, back in the late 60s. And they called him the postman. He popularized that strum. It is also called the old man strum. It is a very popular storytelling type of calypso strum. It's used for that type of slower calypso. It's not a tempo dance calypso strum. It's more a slow calypso tent kind of story. Cha 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 cha. So that's the feel of it, but it's just quite a coincidence that the Tobago jig drum rhythm is designed exactly that way. It has that same character. And now that drum rhythm is taken, put on the guitar, and it becomes part of the calypso vocabulary. And that is the story of calypso, really. Calypso takes rhythms from the traditional. These rhythms come from somewhere, is what I'm saying. And usually they come from within the traditional folk culture, the drum and rhythms, whether it's the Orisha tradition, the ballet tradition, the bongo tradition, or the big drum tradition from Grenada, or it comes from another island in terms of some Latin type of influence coming out of Venezuela or Cuba. These rhythms come from somewhere, and they all have a story to tell. And the last one, which I'll just wrap up quickly, is and check out this rhythm, not like banana or tinine or the postman.
Yes, rebellion and war, war, war. Rebellion and war. If you want war, war.
Very that rhythm comes out of the calendar, sticks right into tradition. the galloping type of rhythm, downbeat emphasized, but it's dribble. That's all it is, very simple, but it's perfect. And that's all it is. Like a dribble kind of downbeat. If you wanted to clean it up, it would be a but it's always picking you up after the downbeat. That's good. And he's singing about war, and he's setting the mood by using that rhythm because it has that driving, relentless kind of aggressive forward kind of leaning. So you can see all of these rhythms, each one of these little examples I give has very, very different characteristics, very different dance. I would not dance to that rhythm the same way I would dance to the Kinene banana type rhythm, or I would dance to the postman. With the postman, you have this kind of laid back thing, take, you're telling the story. Yes, banana is a different thing. You can play it at different speeds and so on. It has a different feel, but it's definitely, you're winding up. It's a different attitude now, right? And the kalinda is the road march that we got on the road. So you see, each one has a totally different character. Yeah. And this is the type of definitions and sort of differences between the styles of calypso that we have to start. As we were discussing here earlier, we have to codify these things if we are going to effectively teach the younger generation how to play calypso. But calypso is not one thing. It's like, how do you play rock and roll? Well, there's several different styles of ways you can strum and you can play rock and roll. So if you're going to teach calypso to the younger generation, you have to teach the whole vocabulary. But to do that, you have to first name them. You have to name these rhythms, and you have to give them an identity. You have to codify these basic rhythmic signatures that go into making a song. So basically what I'm saying is, to summarize, although post-colonial criticism continues to interrogate the impact of colonialism on our political, economic, and religious lives, the nature and extent of our tonality bias in relation to music is still ignored. It's not really analyzed or taken into account. Popular taste has shifted even now over the last 50 years. And when you listen to recordings from the early 60s or 50s, you hardly hear the drums or the bottom end of the music. Today it's the opposite. You're hearing the beat now. The rhythm, people are starting to really get into what's going on in the rhythm. But in academia, we seem to still be calling it storytelling in song. We haven't talked about what's going on down there in the music. Calypso music has not undergone the codification to allow it to develop a comprehensive syllabus that we could teach it, unlike the contemporary genres like jazz and the blues, which have all been highly codified and are being taught in schools. So new generations of jazz musicians are coming out, and they have an incredible knowledge of the whole canon of jazz music because they've been given that foundational education on how this music is constructed. We have not done that in calypso. And I think the music community, there needs to be a concerted effort to document these fundamental components. The community best suited to carry out this work are the calypso percussionists and drummers. Unfortunately, that same community has been decimated by modern developments in the music sector, the drum machine. So 90% of the calypso percussionists and drummers have been pushed to the side. And now it's the keyboard player that does all of that. And there's no work for these guys anymore. They're gone. They're no longer practicing their craft. So we're losing all of that important cultural information. Thank you all for listening.